Okay, today what I want us to do is review our types of forces and take some notes in our journal so that when we go to design and plan and experiment testing force, we know exactly what types of forces we have on this earth. So go ahead and get your journal out and get prepared to take some notes and learn all about the different forces found here on earth.
Okay, so you should be on page 44 in your journal. You can see when you get finished, your little foldable is going to look like this, and of course you can decorate it like I did, or you can as much color or as little color as you want on the front. Now you notice our foldable is a little different. Okay, so you have your foldable, it should look like this. Okay, so when you cut your sheet out, you're going to just cut along every black line. So you cut around the outside black line. You do need to keep this little funny looking rectangle, okay? So then when you cut it, do you see the one where it has the 3 lines? That's what you're going to fold over, okay? And so you fold it over and then you have that little funny square sticking out. It's okay that the black is on the back. That's okay. This is the side where you're going to put the glue. And then you're going to stick it in just like this. And you're going to be writing on the inside as well as on this little flap. So just like I have it in my journal, make sure that you glue it in like that. You need to make sure that you glue this high enough up right under your title, and that you put that sentence stem in at the bottom right here that says, I think we could test friction by. Okay? And then what you're going to do is go ahead and get this glued in. Once you have this glued in, and then your 3 titles, magnetism, friction, and gravity, then you'll be prepared to take notes, and you can press play. Okay, so now that you have your journal set up, we want to just review in general what a force is. We know that a force is a push or a pull that will cause an object to move, stop, or change direction. Okay, so that's all a force is. Now we want to learn about 3 main forces that we see and use every single day. Okay, the first force we want to talk about is magnetism. We know what magnets are. Okay, we've used them. You use them every day almost. We've learned about them earlier this school year. But what we want to focus on now is that it is a force. So it's important to know that magnetism is a force. And if you've ever played around with magnets, you know this. You can sense when they're pulling towards each other. You can feel that. If you take 2 magnets off your fridge, or if you have some at home anywhere, try that and try to place them together. And you can kind of feel that force pushing them together. And what's important to note here is that if you can see, I'm having trouble getting the screen, you can see how I have the north side facing the south side. So every magnet has a north and a south side. The only way the magnets will attract to each other is if the south and the north are facing each other. We call these ends of magnets poles. And opposite poles will attract. So I have to have my south and my north facing each other. And when they attract, they're pulling towards each other. Okay, so magnetism can be a pull when they're attracting each other and opposite poles attract. Okay, now on the other hand, if I turn my magnets around and I now have the north and the north trying to stick together, they can't. And they repel each other. Okay, so when I have 2 poles that are the same, we call them like poles. So like poles are going to repel. And this time it's not a pull. They're pushing away from each other. And we're going to explore this in class this week. So you'll get to test it out using the north and the south poles of a magnet. Okay, but the important thing to remember here is that magnetism is a force. It can be either a push or a pull, depending on whether it is attracting or repelling. So like poles will repel, and they will push away from each other. Okay? Same poles or like poles, well, that's what we just said, will repel. They will push away. But if I have unlike poles, so I have opposites, then they will attract and they will pull towards each other. Okay? So that is magnetism. Make sure you get your notes in your journal. You want to make sure you get all of this in, so you may want to write a little bit small. And remember, at any time, pause the video if you need to stop and take notes. Okay, so the next force we want to talk about is friction, okay? And friction, it's a force, and it's going to work against motion. Okay, so it's going to cause something. If we have a lot of friction, it's going to cause something to slow down or stop. Okay, so, and that's when two surfaces rub together. So anytime we talk about friction, we're going to rub our hands together because I have two surfaces that are rubbing against each other. Okay, just like a car wheel rubbing against the ground, a ball rolling across the carpet. Rough surfaces, and this is the important thing to remember, is that the rough surface is going to create more friction than a smooth surface. So if something like carpet, that's going to have a lot more friction than something like our floor in the classroom, that is smooth tile floor. Okay, so fill in the blank. Rough surface, more friction. Smooth surface, less friction. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind as you go on to the next slide. Okay, I want you to try this. Okay, so if at home I want you to get a toy car or a ball, anything that you may have, and I want you to find a smooth surface, which might be like your kitchen floor, and then I want you to find a rougher surface, which is something like carpet or maybe a rug. Okay, and I want you to take your object and I want you to roll it across both surfaces. So roll it across the smooth surface first and observe what happens. And then I want you to roll it down the rougher surface and observe what happens. If you have measuring tape or a ruler, you could even measure how far the objects went on each surface. Okay, and I just want you to think about what you observed and note those things in your head because it's really going to help us in class tomorrow. Okay, so the last force we want to talk about is gravity. We know all about gravity, and we know that it is a force. Okay, that is so important because some of us at the beginning did not think gravity was a force. It most certainly is a force. And it's a force that's going to pull objects towards the center of the earth. Think about it. How are you able to stay on the ground? Why aren't we just floating around out in space? Gravity, okay? Because gravity is pulling us towards the center of the earth. It is what keeps us down on the earth. It is gravity that pulls us down, okay? Just like this ball. If I let it go, why did it fall to the ground? Gravity. Okay, so make sure that you know these three forces that we have talked about and you are prepared to discuss them tomorrow. The very last slide is going to give you something to think about and then give you your last set of instructions.
Okay, now that we've reviewed all our super important force vocabulary, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about how we could design a fair test to see how friction affects movement. Okay, there's a couple of things you need to pay attention to in this think about it question. Number one, I need a fair test. So I want you to think about everything we've talked about all year about how to create a fair test. Okay, so number one, we need it fair. And number two, I want to talk about friction. Okay, so I want to test the effects of friction on movement. So I want you to think about that and decide how you would set up an experiment similar to our sheep in a Jeep lab to test friction. What would you change? Okay, so what variables would you change, and then what variables would you keep the same? Okay, so think about that, and then you're going to give me a little reflection at the bottom of this journal page and tell me how you think we should set up an experiment to test friction. And what I want you to do right now is you're actually going to go to the next video. You're going to watch a short video reviewing our three variables, the control, the independent, and the dependent. So that way you are 100% prepared for our discussion tomorrow, and you will know exactly how to pick out those three variables